Management consulting, what is it? What's the history of the industry? And how is it evolving today? Hi, I'm Jenny Ray LaRue, the Managing Director of Management Consulted, a group of ex-MBB consultants. And we have a lot of views about the management consulting industry, which I'm excited to share with you today. First of all, I want to define what consulting is because there's a little bit of confusion about that. Consulting in our definition is when you scope a specific project for a specific length of time with a specific goal. Contracting, in contrast, is also an external relationship with an organization, but it is defined by more time and materials, the length of time that you work with an organization, not a specific goal. And to that effect, under consulting, there are a couple of different practice areas. One key one is management consulting, which we're going to talk about in this video. Another large one is tech consulting. And a third one is boutique consulting, which we really focus on in boutique consulting, a lot of different key things like advisory and other areas of consulting. So going back to management consulting, what is it? Management consulting is working with the, you guessed it, management of an organization, usually the C-suite or somebody who is managing a P&L of a division to identify ways that they can improve the behavior of their organization. And that behavior should also drive results. Depending on what kind of organization it is, the results will be different. So if you're a manager of a federal practice, you're gonna have different definitions of what your results need to be than if you're a manager of a publicly traded Fortune 500 company. So thinking about the two of those and separating out those different areas, the common theme between them is that both of them have management. Management, when they don't know what to do, they've got a couple of options. One is to look internally in their organization, and they can go and ask people questions. What's the problem with this? How can we fix this? What should we do? Management consulting, the history of it really arose when organizations realized that they alone could become myopic and dangerously focused on being incredibly narrow in their approach to their business, i.e., they knew what a key issue would be and they were constantly firefighting around legal and not thinking about companies that they should acquire for the next 5 years and not thinking about how to conserve cash for something that might be coming. So management consultants were really entrepreneurial accountants in the early 20th century that were focused on providing advice to management that was broader than the day-to-day scope of their operations. It was thinking on a strategic scale. Where do you want to go? Who do you want to be? How much capital or cash do you want to have in order to get there? And then making a variety of recommendations, usually tiered into order. So we think this is the best recommendation, but this is an alternative, and here are some other ones, so that you can focus on a couple of those key things. Thinking about all of that together, management consulting is an amazing field for someone if you ultimately at some point in your life want to be in management. So if you want to be in federal, or if you want to be in advisory, or if you want to be in another area of business, then that's a totally different situation. But if you want to be in management of an organization, management consulting is going to be for you. Here's why. It helps you understand how to think like the people that you will serve to ultimately become a manager inside an organization. Managers are usually top performers that think one level ahead of where they are currently. And so in the field of management consulting, you have big players like McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. You have other players like the Big Four. You have a lot of boutique firms that really focus on one specific industry or one specific practice area. And ultimately their goal is to drive more impact. Some firms define impact by profit, some define it in a multiple bottom line way. But ultimately, the focus is going to be understanding how to drive more impact by taking a step back, taking a look at the current state of the organization and their current processes, layering that against best practices and data, and then making recommendations for the future. Let me tell you why I think management consulting is one of the best gigs around. Becoming a manager is really hard. You need to manage and motivate and inspire and train and hire people. At a consulting firm, you have the luxury of really just getting a bird's eye view into how an organization works without having all of the day-to-day pressures. You can think about the what and the how. You can think about the who, and you don't necessarily bear the burden of the clutter, the mind clutter that comes with the day-to-day operations of an organization. It also, because you're able to do that, gives you speed of analysis. So working as a management consultant, one of the things that I noticed a huge gap in between my first year and my second year, when I made the leap to speed, was that in the first year, I got bogged down in all the same details that other outside managers did. In the second year, I really knew how to cut to the chase, how to get to the point, how to really focus on what the key issues were inside the business. Let me just conclude by talking a little bit about some of the scope of the management consulting industry. I think that out of the entire time that I've known about management consulting, which is, goodness, coming up on about 20 years now, management consulting has been fairly stable. So the major disruption that happened where some firms were unprepared for the global financial crisis. They had insufficient cash and overextended headcounts, and they made corrections. Some of them sold, and some of them had partner groups that were dissolved into other areas. But overall, we haven't really seen a lot of change in the practice. There's a pitch. There's a delivery, there's analysts that are assigned to the delivery, and it's on-site or off-site, and even lifestyles have really not changed inside consulting. But I think that in the next 20 years, we're gonna see some changes, because one of the challenges in the increasing competitive landscape of consulting, by the way, it's a pretty high profit margin services area, and so high profit margin areas naturally inspire new entrants to come and chase after the profit that are in those areas. So knowing that and understanding that you have almost maximum utilization of the current people that are at firms, an inability to raise prices going forward, and therefore a need to deliver things more efficiently, I think that the rise of machine learning and AI and their usage in data analytics is going to be incredibly important. However, a lot of people will say that consulting will be dead in 20 years. And I can't imagine that that's true, because for every piece of data, there are multiple interpretations. And so far, we do not have the advancement of AI or machine learning to provide us with the multiple different interpretations to both select what data we need to look at, integrate it with the right things, and then enact it in the current environment. I think what we will see is leaner teams that are relying more on heavy analytics from an outside or an internally sourced group. And so we're gonna see, rather than teams of 6, maybe teams of 4 that are delivering the same quality and quantity of analysis and research. I would love to be proven wrong. So in 2040, you come back and ask me about that, and we'll talk a little bit about how this works. But overall, I think consulting and management consulting in particular is a very exciting place to both start or integrate a career mid-career. I think it's an incredible service to the organizations that you work with to provide them with clarity and data that they otherwise wouldn't have the time or the ability to focus on. And I think it's also just a really special place to learn and grow, whether you decide to stay for 1 or 2 years or for your entire consulting career. Thanks so much for watching. If you're interested in understanding how consulting firms are different, i.e. how they pay differently, what their different practice areas are, and how you interview to get in, we would love to provide more information for you on our website at managementconsulted.com.